ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's little lesson about the special slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines. Unfortunately, I didn't have you get this assignment to write it out yourself, but here we go. Let's dive right in. So I have graphed these lines for your viewing pleasure, and I wanted you to take a moment to look at the equations and see how they relate to their graphs. On the left here, we have a couple of parallel lines, and I want you to see if you notice anything special about the two equations. Go ahead, jot that down, find a scratch paper, just jot it down real quick and see if you can come up with something that's special about the equations that would tell you that the lines are parallel. Now, do the same thing for these two. So these are perpendicular lines. They meet a right angle here. Once again, look at these equations and see if you notice any sort of pattern here and see if that matches up at all. Alright, actually, let's look, now that you have kind of a prediction of how the equations relate to whether they're parallel or perpendicular, test them against these two. Again, on the left side, we have a couple of perpendicular lines, and on the right side, we have a couple of parallel lines. Look at their equations, see if you find something that relates the two together, and make a prediction. Is that what makes these lines parallel? And do the same here. What sort of pattern do you see between them? And see how that relates to perpendicular lines. So take a moment, come up with a little hypothesis. What's special about the equations that'll let you know that the lines are parallel or perpendicular? Well, let's have you check your hypotheses against this. Parallel lines have equal slopes. So if we look at our previous two examples, these two are parallel lines, and if you look at their slopes, that's the numbers with the x, they're both the same, right? Both negative 1/4 here, and then on this one here, they have the same slope of negative 3. So if you got that, awesome. The second conclusion you should be getting is that perpendicular lines have what are called opposite reciprocal slopes. So you might not have written that down exactly, but the way it works is the slopes are flipped versions of each other. So if we look back at our example here, the slopes are 3/2 and negative 2/3. They're flipped and they have a sign change, and that's the opposite is a sign change, and then the reciprocal is flipped. And then the same thing here, we got negative 6 and 1/6. These are flipped versions of each other, right? Negative 6 is negative 6/1. You flip them, you change their signs, and those lines will be perpendicular to each other. And so that's the big thing you're supposed to get from this little kind of mini lesson about parallel lines and slopes and perpendicular lines and slopes. Parallel lines have equal slopes, and perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes.